On this special home video edition of Sightings, a man has a frightening dream about an airliner.
It just goes on its back and then goes straight down into the ground.
Days later, the vision becomes a tragic headline. A mother yearns to know the truth about the murder of her daughter.
I didn't put any connection together in the beginning at all.
But only a psychic detective can fill in the blanks.
It was a hit. It wasn't a random shooting.
These people believe they have been cured of chronic debilitating diseases by the touch of this man's hands.
Basically, I work on most of the cases after doctors have given up.
This man withstands excruciating pain using the power of his mind alone.
It's the odd example that one studies to find out what the boundaries of reality really are.
While science searches for an answer in the extraordinary abilities of our pets.
I think it's wonderfully important that the researchers and the neurologists can open their minds to something beyond just the medication.
If, as researchers believe, we use only 5% of our brains, what incredible potential remains in the untapped regions of our minds?
Hello, I'm Tim White. Explore the truth about psychic experience in this special report from Sightings. Has your intuition ever told you that the phone is going to ring? And then it does. Have you ever had a sinking feeling that a loved one's in trouble, only to find out later that they really are? Well, these experiences happen to all of us every day. Are they mere coincidence, random chance? Or could they be something more? A sixth sense we all have, but which only a few of us have developed to its fullest potential. Ancient ritual and tribal ceremony. This is the traditional domain of the psychic experience. Firewalkers use mind over matter to withstand the blistering heat of red-hot coals searing the soles of their feet. In a Bengay ritual, men stab themselves with razor-sharp knives but do not bleed. In a mind-altering trance, these monks experience mystical visions. These are the images we associate with the extraordinary powers of the mind. The mystery of psychic ability has captivated people since the beginning of time. In the 1880s, the British and American Societies for Psychical Research began the first scientific study of paranormal phenomena, investigating claims of ghosts, hauntings, and life after death. The scientist most responsible for shifting the focus to the psychic abilities of the living was Dr. J.B. Rhine, who founded the Institute for Parapsychology at Duke University in 1930. Dr. Rhine brought parapsychology into the laboratory and popularized the phrase ESP to describe what he found.
Well, it does really exist. The implications begin with the basic fact that ESP is non-physical. It shows that there's something that man can do that extends beyond space-time.
Dr. Rhine also investigated and believed in the existence of psychokinesis, the effect of mind over matter. Rhine's work caught on rapidly with the public. It was the Depression era, and people seemed anxious for something to believe in. In fact, his ESP theories were so popular, countless fakes arose to cash in on them.
Even though my eyes are sealed, I shall read a newspaper. This is a feature picture page. At the top
but Rhine's work was considered fakery too, by mainstream scientists unwilling to accept his controversial theories. And without concrete proof, the public's interest in ESP soon faded.
And it's fine to be high.
It lay dormant for 30 years until the 60s counterculture sparked a resurgence of interest. It was a time, once again, when people were actively seeking new answers. The big name in the field was still J.B. Rhine, only by now ESP was taking on a new name, Psi, the Greek letter denoting the unknown. But when the 60s era ended, so did its fads, and widespread interest in parapsychology waned once again. 30 years later, we're looking back at 100 years of our own research and that of experimenters worldwide, and looking forward to a new millennium, where researchers tell us ESP, or psi phenomena, could simply be part of our everyday lives. Paranormal researchers believe that we are all born with psychic ability, but that time and training in a nuts and bolts bottom line world gradually overshadows our sensitive psychic side. Researchers are working on methods for bringing latent ESP skills to the surface, and they're finding that environment plays a key role. Experts believe that ESP may be strongest at night. Throughout history, night has been a time of mystery, eeriness, and the supernatural. But many researchers believe that it's more than just myth, that we are more susceptible to psychic experiences late at night.
There's something different about the brain during the nighttime that allows psi phenomena to occur. The brain becomes electrically active, specifically between midnight and 4 in the morning. And telepathy and clairvoyant cases become more likely to occur.
Besides time of day, there may be other environmental factors that create conducive states for psychic impressions.
There's another entirely different line of research that's relating certain ESP events to physical phenomena such as the geomagnetism of the Earth.
It even penetrates the house, penetrates through your brain. And we now know that certain individuals are sensitive to geomagnetic activity. They're also more prone to experiencing and reporting psi phenomena.
Magnetic fields aren't the only physical properties that may affect ESP. Some researchers think weather, or more precisely, fluctuations in weather, may also produce conditions of heightened psychic sensitivity. But the most dramatic correlation between weather and ESP has come from those who have had a close encounter with lightning.
Those who are struck by lightning and recover tend to suddenly report psi phenomena, that they suddenly have psychical phenomena taking place. Regardless of how you want to define it, they see themselves as different. They seem to perceive the world in a different way.
It was one of those where the lightning comes and just boom. And as I watched the lightning, I thought, it's so beautiful. And the next thing I know, the Venetian blinds had wrapped around me. The chimney was in the neighbor's yard. Both windows were completely ripped out of the sills. The bed I was in was on fire, and lightning had struck our home.
Before Greta Alexander was struck by lightning, she did not have any psychic abilities. But after she was hit, Greta claims she began to experience psychic phenomena.
After that, I began sensing and knowing and feeling. I was crying and pacing the floor because I kept seeing pictures and hearing things and knowing things. I would know when my parents were coming. I would know when he was going to sell a policy. I would know about the children.
When you have a lightning strike and that kind of current induction, that certain neurons within the brain are damaged, and the regrowth basically restructures, rewires the brain, specifically in the deep temporal lobe, which allows you to perceive things and have properties that are quite different than before.
It took time for Greta to accept her newfound window on the psychic world, but once she did, she became famous for sharing her powers with others, at first through readings and consultations. Later, as her understanding of her skills grew, she began conducting psychic medical diagnoses.
Now, your legs have been bothering you a little bit. Here, or your limbs, here.
They always have.
Okay, because cancer is easier for me to recognize. Heart disease is very easy for me to recognize. Gallbladder, stomach. But I feel that I am not a physician. I will speak with their physician, and then I will tell him, and then he then can do the sophisticated tests.
She not only claims a very high success rate with her diagnoses, in some cases she will even attempt psychic healing.
I feel that what the mind can conceive, the body will achieve. And the brain is in a constant process of knowing. We have not scratched the surface of what the mind can do.
Whether or not Greta Alexander has extrasensory perception, a fateful lightning strike 30 years ago did change her life forever. triggering abilities Greta feels we all have.
I think there are abilities, everybody's got it. Everybody can play chopsticks. I can just happen to play Chopin.
Perhaps the most dramatic example of the psychic experience is when someone makes a prediction and then it comes true. Parapsychologists call it precognition. In 1979, David Booth, a man who, unlike Greta Alexander, did not consider himself a psychic, had a series of recurring nightmares. In his mind's eye, he saw a crash, an inferno, death. And then he saw it on the evening news. May 25th, 1979, the date of one of the worst plane crashes in history. A DC-10 took off from Chicago's O'Hare Airport, flew a half mile, then suddenly turned on its side and slammed into the ground, exploding on impact. All 272 people on board died. But perhaps the greatest tragedy of all was that it could have been prevented, because this deadly crash happened exactly the way one ordinary man had dreamed it would.
The important thing here is that this is one of the few cases, the only one I've ever known about, where somebody who had a dream came and told somebody in authority or in advance instead of after the fact.
That man was 27-year-old David Booth, a rental car manager from Cincinnati, who kept having the same disturbing dream.
On the morning of May 16th, I had a dream, and I look up in the air, and there's this great big jet, and it wasn't making the noise that it should. It starts to turn with the wing going up in the air, and it just goes on its back and then goes straight down into the ground and it explodes. I can't even describe the type of explosion that it was, and the terror, just that instantaneous terror that just struck me right then.
In his dreams, Booth always saw the logo of one specific airline. After having the same nightmare 7 nights, Booth contacted the FAA.
I said, well, is this a prediction? He said, no, it's not a prediction, it's just disturbing. And, you know, we made notes of it. You couldn't just arbitrarily ground an airline because somebody dreamed of something.
On Friday, May 25th, that was the 10th night that I had the dream. I woke up. All the emotions that I had been having were still there, except I knew that that was it. That was the last time that I was going to have the dream.
Then that afternoon, a DC-10 crashed in Chicago, and it had turned, and it was turning back. There were some discrepancies, but there was an awful lot of similarity as to what happened on that Friday afternoon.
David Booth's worst nightmare came true, and it was amazingly accurate. He had correctly predicted the name of the airline, the model of the plane, the way it would turn on its side. He'd seen the right engine fall off as the plane fell from the sky and burst into flames. Dreaming and real life were now one.
I was trying to blame myself, where he was saying, that was, it was something that, I didn't have to do.
Since this interview, David Booth has kept his life private. He has made no more public predictions.
What you've got to understand is that while Mr. Booth had a dream that had a remarkable prediction, if you will, there was not enough of a prediction to say what, where, when, why, or how. And there was nothing that could be done. And you couldn't take government funds and chase somebody's dream with them.
The airline David Booth dreamed about was not grounded because our government does not believe in the reliability of precognition. It's an attitude that's widespread among many organizations and professions, and nowhere is psychic ability more reviled than in the mainstream medical community. The psychic in psychic healing doesn't refer to storefront psychics or fortune tellers we're bombarded with. In healing, psychic means the powerful roles the mind and spirit play in making us well. Since earliest recorded history, it has continued to coexist with mainstream medicine. In primitive cultures, shamans are the sole healers in their community. They are selected, not schooled, to perform ritualistic medicine. Their powers are bestowed on them during ceremonial circles, in which they make sacrifices to the spirits. Once they achieve their altered healing state, they call to their faithful flock to come to them for a cure based on belief in the benevolent forces of the unknown. While these rites still exist around the world, this type of psychic healing seems naive to our more sophisticated culture. But it is slowly coming into the Western world's consciousness. Doctors debunk psychic healing as pure fraud, but thousands of people who've been cured of supposedly incurable illnesses by the touch of a healer believe differently.
Dean Kraft is a modern healer who uses the ancient technique known as the laying on of hands. Kraft claims to have mysterious healing energy that flows through his hands into his patients. His success rate is remarkable, especially since most people who come to Dean Kraft have come as a last resort.
I could feel the heat oozing from his hand like an oven.
Something is not right. These hands are on fire and they're vibrating.
How does it work? I don't have any idea. Does it work? It does.
Then this friend of mine took me to lunch and sat me down and said, there's no reason why you should be in this pain. Dean Kraft will heal you. He's real.
Dean Kraft was pursuing a career in the music industry when, at the age of 21, he claims to have developed telekinesis.
During one of these demonstrations, or showing off at the time, my brother-in-law got this headache while he was watching this, and my first response was to go lay hands on his head, which I did, and of course, his headache went away, and I didn't really think much of it at the time. And I started laying on of hands, and that process is pretty intuitive. It's not a planned process. Once I start laying on of hands, it's sort of my hands go to areas and I sort of follow them. What else goes on is I start to visualize, and it's like if this tumor is the size of an egg, I start to picture it, and in my mind I try to see it get smaller. I see myself to be like a catalyst, like a spark plug, that I use my energy to try to catalyst the person's own healing system. I believe that medical doctors are meant to diagnose. I believe very much in medical science. And basically, I work on most of the cases after doctors have given up.
With his hands, Kraft has been able to effect many positive changes in his clients' medical conditions. Even the medical establishment accepts his amazing healing powers.
I've seen patients who are paralyzed get up and walk. I've seen people who have cancer no longer have cancer. I've been watching this happening for 12 years.
A study by Howard University found that 40% of Dean Kraft's patients show a definite improvement in their medical condition. Even more remarkable are the results of experiments Kraft has done in a clinically controlled environment. Using his laying on of hands technique, he has effectively lowered the blood pressure of laboratory rats. Kraft has also been able to destroy cancer cells, called HeLa cells, in a test tube. But the nature of his power is still a mystery.
We know that it can affect things, but we haven't been able yet to determine what is this energy. Energy is a very loose word. I don't even like the word energy. It's a very loose word that's used. But it's the best one, I guess, to describe something that's some type of transference that's taking place.
I had very bad sciatica for about a year and a half. It was equivalent to having your teeth drilled on constantly. That's really what the pain was like, what it got to. I couldn't drive because I couldn't press my right foot down on the gas pedal or brake, so I had to have someone drive me. I was seeing a chiropractor constantly, and that would alleviate the pain for about an hour, and then it would just slowly come back during the day. And I was basically in tears most of the time, and my quality of life was nil. Then I went to see Dean, and I remember thinking, well, is this going to work? And after one session with him, I was healed forever and ever.
In 1985, Nelda Buss was diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, better known as Lou Gehrig's disease.
It was my birthday. I was 43 years old, and they told me I had Lou Gehrig's disease. Well, they actually said amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and I still wasn't real sure what that was.
ALS is a medical mystery. There is no known cause and no known cure.
The established medical profession, they just said, goodbye, see you, have a good life, live it to your fullest.
The disease inevitably progresses from partial to complete paralysis of all the muscles in the body.
She just kept getting progressively worse, and I guess from the time she was diagnosed until she was basically an invalid was only about 6 months or something.
In the final stages of ALS, Nelda had become a quadriplegic, unable to move, but mentally alert and aware that she was about to die.
I gave away most of my good clothing that I had, and I had my dress all picked out for what I was to be buried in.
Then Nelda heard about Dean Kraft.
And it was just such a relief to talk to him. I said that the doctors say there's no hope, and he said, well, that's not always true.
Kraft did his laying on of hands for 3 months, and then they had a small but significant breakthrough.
In May, Glenn was showering me and I could move my toe, and that was so exciting.
After her toes, Nelda slowly regained movement in her fingers, then her back muscles. Soon she could control her hands, then her arms and her legs. Nelda worked very hard on her own physical exercise regimen, in addition to treatments from Dean Kraft. Her family videotaped her progress over the course of a year.
It's wonderful to see her and her family being together and enjoying life together. Words cannot express the feeling that one has when this happens.
Okay. How's that?
Everything has changed. She's back and she's doing more than she ever did before. I mean, it's great to have a mother.
As doctors begin to open up to the possible benefits of psychic healing, other professionals are following suit. Police and law enforcement authorities are now beginning to allow psychic detectives to provide clues in unsolved cases.
Psychic detectives have played an important role in the still unsolved murder of 18-year-old Caitlin Arquette. She was gunned down behind the wheel of her car in Albuquerque, New Mexico in July 1989. At first, police believed Caitlin was the victim of a random act of violence. But as investigators delved into the case, they soon realized there was nothing random about this murder. Even the most seasoned detectives were stunned by the strange twists and turns in this case. Psychic detectives provided intriguing leads, and eeriest of all, what appeared to be Caitlin's own attempts to reach out from the grave with information about her murderer. Crucial details allegedly from beyond directly paralleled those in a murder mystery written by her own mother. Under the pen name Lois Duncan, Lois Arquette is a successful mystery writer whose novels are filled with intrigue and terror. But there was no greater horror for Lois than discovering an uncanny link between details of her daughter's death and one of her own novels.
I didn't put any connection together in the beginning at all. It wasn't until one thing after another began to occur that I suddenly realized that I had more or less written the story of our own true life horror story. In Don't Look Behind You, I based the personality of my heroine April upon Kate. April was chased by a hitman in a Camaro. That book was published in June 1989, and in July 1989, Kate was chased down and shot to death by a triggerman in a Camaro. The most shocking thing of all to us was that when we read in the police file the Hispanic man who was arrested, his name was Mike, everybody called him Vamp. And in Don't Look Behind You, the hitman who chased down April was named Mike Vamp.
As police probed Caitlin's brutal killing, they discovered the young woman had a secret life centered around her boyfriend, an alleged gang member believed to be involved in illegal activities. But investigators were unable to establish a direct link between either the boyfriend or his gang and Caitlin's murder. With the police department at a dead end, in desperation, Caitlin's mother turned to local psychic Betty Minch.
I rang the doorbell, and this middle-aged woman answered the door, and I looked at her. I had an instant feeling that I knew her. It wasn't that I'd met her. I had invented her. She was physically identical to Ann Summers, the psychic detective in my book, The Third Eye.
Betty Minch considers herself a bridge between the living and the dead. Minch claims she can pick up messages telepathically while in a meditative trance, channeling the words of the dead through the keys of her typewriter.
Usually I get a lot of color moving in my head. Then out of that, sometimes there will come maybe an image. And that's when the words seem to want to start pouring into my head. There was a very clear contact with Caitlin. She was right there. We had the idea that Caitlin was in some kind of trouble, that there were other things going on that the family wasn't quite aware of.
Amazingly enough, it appeared that Caitlin was conducting her own murder investigation from beyond the grave. Some of the messages Betty Minch claimed to be receiving provided police with important new leads. Investigators soon received an anonymous tip from someone who'd seen one of the Crime Stoppers posters the Arquette family had placed around Albuquerque. Arrests were made that proved psychic Betty Minch had been dead right.
She told us that the people who were arrested would have been driving a lowrider car. There would be 2 men in the front seat, 1 in the back seat, that there would be no eyewitnesses, but that arrest would be made because the men would be heard bragging, that our best help might come from somebody in the media, and she identified who that person would be, an investigative reporter named Mike Gallagher.
But there was insufficient evidence to hold the 3 suspects, and they were released. Desperate for more evidence, Lois contacted Noreen Rainier, a well-respected psychic detective from Maitland, Florida. Working with a police sketch artist, Rainier attempted to create a drawing based on impressions she claimed to be receiving from Caitlin.
I have to get their scent. I have to pick up their vibes. And somehow something personal that was on at the time of the crime gives me more information. I can pick up the scent of Katie psychically.
During Noreen's session, Lois listened in on the phone from 900 miles away.
I was sitting in Albuquerque knowing that Noreen was doing this, and I knew what the alleged trigger man looked like because he'd been arrested. I was trying to concentrate on Kate, and I was saying, tell Mother why you were killed. Was it a random shooting, as the police think, or was it something else? Send me a symbol, send me a message through Noreen Rainier. And the picture Noreen sent me was a sketch of Mike Vamp, the hitman in Don't Look Behind You, exactly as he appeared on the jacket of the British edition of that book. Everything was there, even the little scar between the eyebrows. It's like seeing something had been copied from the jacket. And I just started to shake. I couldn't stop shaking.
Lois was shocked. Caitlin had been the only member of the Arquette family to see the new book jacket of the British edition.
I just was very confused when she was telling me I got some man on a book jacket. I'm saying, what are you talking? But then it made sense that Kate was telling us it was a hit. It wasn't a random shooting. It was a planned killing. It wasn't random. And that's what we needed to know.
Even more startling is a tape recording Noreen made as she supposedly channeled Caitlin's own description of her final hours. It's Noreen's voice, but Caitlin's words.
I'm meeting somebody at a shopping center with a C in it. I went up the hill towards the north to that big place up there, to this, I want to call it the Desert Castle. There's just an important person there that I'm not supposed to know is there. I saw things that I shouldn't have seen. They had to make sure that there was no way I would ever talk, and this was a way of silencing me. My crime that was committed against me was to silence me. I'll never be silenced. I'm not a bad person. I'm just young, and I just was curious. I was a good daughter to your mother. I told you almost everything. Almost.
The incredible revelations from psychics Minch and Rainier prompted Lois to write Who Killed My Daughter? And while the police have not yet solved Caitlin's homicide, Lois is encouraged by one psychic message Betty Minch believes she received.
She said that Kate was sending a symbol, that the symbol was a wolf with a collar around its neck, its head jerked back, and the message was that Kate was very sure that the wolf who had been after her was soon to be caught and collared.
The message was particularly significant to Lois, who originally entitled her book, One to the Wolves.
I couldn't explain any of this. All I could say to myself was, it's happening. Somehow it's happening. I have now come to believe that there must be some kind of transition point where it is possible for the dead to communicate with the living, perhaps when they have some very, very strong message to get across. I think Kate was killed because she was getting ready to tell the truth, and she couldn't do it herself, and now she wanted me to do it for her.
Lois Arquette is hoping police or psychic detectives will soon find out what horrible facts Caitlin knew and who stopped her from telling the truth.
It's clear that the last great frontier yet to be explored is the human mind. Even after a century of astonishing scientific and medical advancement, we still know surprisingly little about the brain. One way scientists are trying to learn more is by studying our pets.
Pets could be helping here, helping people with epilepsy. It's a condition characterized by frightening, uncontrollable seizures. In the Dark Ages, epilepsy was thought to be the work of the devil. Today, we've abandoned those outdated ideas that people with epilepsy are under satanic influence. But there are genuine mysteries associated with epilepsy, and medical experts are turning to dogs for some amazing new ways of understanding this misunderstood neurological condition. Angie Barnum knows the incredible supernatural power of a seizure alert dog firsthand. For the last 10 years, Angie's dog Sheba has been warning her of potentially life-threatening seizures before they happen.
She paces and whines and jumps on me if I'm not paying attention. She's constant. She always knows.
Angie's seizures were so unpredictable, she was confined to a wheelchair. In 1983, she sought out a program that was matching dogs with disabled owners. At first, Angie was attracted to a Labrador, but Sheba proved she could do more than just fetch.
Angie went into a seizure, and the yellow lab just ignored her, and Sheba keyed into it. Completely ignored me. She went straight to Angie, and we stood around in fascination watching this dog fixated on this girl.
Angie adopted Sheba, and the two became inseparable. Angie discovered that Sheba's special gift wasn't just an isolated event.
I was out playing with my friends, and she started pacing and whining, and I thought she was just acting up, and I went home, and a few minutes later, I had a seizure. Come here, Sheebs!
Sheba was so accurate in predicting seizures in advance that Angie gained enough confidence to leave her wheelchair behind and compete in gymnastics, with Sheba at her side.
She lets me know before I have a seizure so I can get down off the equipment. With her, I can know I'm going to have one, and I can get down before I hurt myself.
In 1987, Angie won a gold medal in the Special Olympics, and she gives a lot of the credit to Sheba's extraordinary ability. But Sheba is not unique, according to Rhine of the Epilepsy Institute.
We had people calling up all the time saying, I know you're going to think I'm nuts, because they didn't know who they were talking to, but this is what my dog does.
One of those reluctant callers was veterinarian Liz Rudy, who has had seizures for 10 years. Liz noticed that before her seizures, her dog Ribbon would stare and lick her hands.
I didn't really tell anybody or talk about it because it seemed too strange to be believable.
But Ribbon alerted consistently for 9 years. Before Ribbon died, Liz got a new puppy named Raisin.
I got her to see whether she could pick up this behavior from Ribbon. I didn't think it was something that was real likely, but I thought it would be interesting to see if one dog could do it.
Raisin turned out to have the same uncanny ability. Early on, she saved Liz from a potentially fatal situation, alerting her to an oncoming seizure while Liz was in the shower. While we were recording this story, Sightings crew members noticed Raisin was paying particular attention to Liz. Then it started. First, the intense stare. Then Ribbon tried to get Liz's attention. And finally, the barking started. Liz's seizures aren't violent. Instead, she seems to slip away from the world around her. Ribbon instinctively stays by her side, protecting her for the duration of the episode. Does Ribbon have a unique ability to detect seizures, or is Liz somehow giving off subtle clues about her condition?
When you have a phenomenon like this and you want to do a scientific investigation, the first thing to try to determine is whether, in fact, the phenomenon is bona fide or not.
Neurologist Dr. Douglas LeBar assists the Epilepsy Institute in their study of dogs like Ribbon. Liz is a participant in this research. Here, she's hooked up to a brainwave monitor that can detect the onset of a seizure. The Institute is also compiling statistics based on a survey sent out to pet owners who do have seizures. A substantial portion are reporting some type of alerting behavior. Some experts speculate that the dogs are detecting seizures through their acute sense of smell or by their acute awareness of certain body movements in their owners. But then why is it that only certain dogs seem to have the ability to detect seizures? Animal behaviorist Peter Borschel is studying the phenomenon.
If we can learn what the dogs are capable of doing, how they can pick up the pre-seizure signals, then we can have a way of screening dogs, trying to find out if there's a breed difference, picking dogs that are good at it versus those that aren't.
Come on, where's Jessie?
10-year-old Jessica Lindgren has up to 5 seizures each week. Her mother Leslie is working with their dog Trina, training her to help Jessica during her seizures.
I think it's wonderfully important that the researchers and the neurologists can open their minds to something beyond just the medication, just the office visits, just the tests. I think it's great.
Jessica doesn't need science to explain why her dog is special.
I go like this, and then Trina licks my face like this. And then that's her way of saying, "It's okay, Jessica."
Is there a paranormal connection between some dogs and their owners with epilepsy? Medical doctors would say no, but they're still at a loss to explain why. It is a mystery that science can't explain, but researchers continue to study the phenomenon, working toward a more complete understanding of the strange and wonderful connection between people and animals.
We don't know why dogs like Sheba and Raisin can predict seizures, but they do. Until science figures out why, we can only judge the value of their psychic ability by the results. Dorothy Allison is one of the world's most respected psychics, not because we understand how she does it, but because Dorothy, too, gets results.
For 25 years, Dorothy Allison has been involved in over 4,000 police cases, solving murders and finding over 100 missing persons. Her amazing success rate has attracted international attention. She has worked on some of the 20th century's most grisly murders: Son of Sam, John Wayne Gacy, and Atlanta's serial killer Wayne Williams.
The only way I ever get involved is if the police call me. If they don't, I will not work on a case. I do not volunteer any services to any policeman unless I receive a written letter. With a single murder, you're dealing with a single victim and a single murderer. With a serial killer now, you're dealing not only with a smart person, but a very devious, cunning person. And then you've got so many people, so many visions, so many faces all at once.
And talking to Dorothy, you have to sort of interrogate her like a suspect. She sees locations, and you have to narrow these locations down to find what you're looking for.
When the bodies of 33 young men were found in the crawl space of John Wayne Gacy's house in Chicago, Dorothy Allison was brought in to find the body of the one remaining missing boy, whose disappearance had started the investigation. She told Detective Joe Kozenzak he would find the body on April 9th, near a bridge by a river.
I was sitting at my desk, phone rang, it was a sheriff from a small county near this bridge. And he said, "You better get down here. We found a body in the river down here. We think it's that boy you're looking for." And I looked at my desk calendar, and it was April 9th.
My goal is to see how many killers can I knock down. It's like a game with me now. I love getting a killer. I really do.
Although many police officers are still reluctant to admit it, there are many cases in which psychic detectives have provided important new leads and information. One such case occurred in 1979 when psychic detective Kathleen Ray helped police find the body of a little girl who'd been murdered.
Fresno, in the heart of California's fertile Central Valley. It's a place where you can still find tranquil family farms, but it's also a place where tragedy has struck. On February 3rd, 1979, 8-year-old Victoria de Santiago, her sister Eva, and their dog all vanished. What really happened that day is still just speculation, The girls were last seen together at a neighborhood store.
The counterman said that he remembers the girls coming in and he told them to go out because they couldn't bring the dog in.
They may have been abducted outside.
What we figured is that perhaps whoever this individual was there in the parking lot.
Perhaps a stranger grabbed the girl's dog and used him to lure Victoria and Eva into his car. One day later, 3-year-old Eva was found. Victoria and her dog were still missing.
She was a very beautiful little girl. She was always very protective of her sister. She said that her sister told the man to let her go and that she would stay, and just to let her, not to hurt her sister, and to let her go. And I just always remember that. And so from that, I know that she was, just a very good person.
The police exhausted all leads. Days, then weeks passed with no new clues. No witnesses came forward.
And in my sleep, I was dreaming about what can I do? What other avenues can I go? And it came to me in the dream. I mean, I sat right up, and her name was Kathleen Ray.
Kathleen Ray is a psychic detective. She uses the powers of her mind to help law enforcement solve crimes. She claims she can see missing children, bodies, criminals, and for the past 20 years, she's been remarkably accurate. Kathleen Ray has gained a reputation for accuracy, even among skeptics.
Intuition is something that everybody has, and the intuitive sense is a sense of feeling. But these feelings are something I've educated, like you've educated your other senses, to where I can use them more fully.
Despite skepticism from the police, the De Santiago family asked that Kathleen help find Victoria.
When there's only a light shining out of total darkness, you're going to walk towards that light. Whether it's the wrong way, the right way, it doesn't matter. It's a direction.
I was told that a psychic was being brought in and I was going to fly to San Jose to meet this psychic. And I thought, I'm going to fly up there and I'm going to meet this lady wearing gypsy clothes. She's going to take me into this house. We're going to burn some incense. We're going to rattle some bones. She's going to throw some dust around in the air and tell me something that's totally irrelevant to the case.
I am not doing what you see in these great, what I call horror movies. I don't suddenly grab my head and fall down and say, oh, they hit me in the head, or oh, this poor person's been stabbed. I don't do that. I'm more like an objective bystander.
The psychic part of this was just way off. It didn't make sense to me. How somebody 180 miles from here is going to tell me how to find a body in my town.
It's really taking feelings up and bringing a whole picture and holding that picture long enough. Just like going to a movie or turning the TV on and seeing a picture in front of your face.
I didn't believe it. But after 5 minutes with her, she told me enough stuff that she had 100% of my attention. I was believing in her.
It was the beginning of an unlikely partnership. The sergeant, the psychic, and the family.
All I could think of asking her was, did she have to go through a lot of pain?
We felt that Victoria at this point was still barely alive, just barely.
The family hoped that they weren't too late, that Victoria was still alive and Kathleen could lead them to her.
She told me the road she was on was not a well-traveled road.
I saw this plowed field. I knew the field had just been plowed.
Kay said she's laying parallel to the road. I feel she's laying parallel to the road with her face towards the road.
I'll see the bushes, the trees, the poultry farm.
Kay said that when I found the body, there would be chickens. She said, I get chickens around the body. Chickens, chickens, chickens.
There has to be a farmer whose name starts with an S. There has to be a street that starts with an L. There has to be a windmill.
After my interview with Kay, as I was walking out the door, and I'll never forget this, she stopped me, she grabbed my arm, and she said, Tim, find the dog and you'll find Victoria.
Back in Fresno, pursuing conventional leads, Sergeant McFadden's partner, Detective Popejoy, found the dog.
Detective Popejoy was at the house where the dog was found. He verified it was the dog. So I asked Detective Popejoy, I said, well, are there chickens out there?
So I asked the farmer there, I says, is there a poultry ranch here? He said, yes, just south of here, about a quarter of a mile, there's a abandoned poultry ranch.
Detective Popejoy, he got the call on the dog, and he came out here and talked to the farmer that found the dog, and he found it down here a little ways and brought it back to this house. And when I was talking to him on the phone, he said there wasn't a windmill.
It was a situation that I'll never forget as long as I live, was him on the phone to me, and we are talking about this windmill, and I'm telling him there's no windmill here, and the landowner standing behind me said, oh yeah, you just walk by one, it's in the front yard.
As I'm telling him things that should be there, and he's confirming these back to me that Kay said would be there, I'm getting higher and higher. And wow, this gal does know what she's talking about.
We immediately called for officers to respond, and it was from him telling me what she saw 145 miles away.
The police dispatched a search team that had been briefed on Kathleen's psychic visions. The L, they were on Leonard Street. The S, it was on the mailbox, the first letter of the farmer's last name. And by the side of the road, they found Victoria. Her naked body was in an irrigation ditch under the largest tree in the area, all as Kathleen had described. Victoria had been sexually assaulted, then left to die.
She had been killed like an animal, and she was still alive, in a coma, suffering right there in the little trench. And Kathleen Ray found that, as she described it to the T.
After the body was discovered, Kathleen returned to her home in San Jose, and the police continued to search for Victoria's killer. But 13 years later, the murderer is still at large. Sightings has brought Kathleen Ray back to Fresno, back to the place where Victoria's body was found, to get new psychic impressions.
When I go to the man that did this, he has stubby hands, and their hands of a laborer. I don't feel like he's here anymore. I want to go further south to a town start with an S, and that he's working down there now. This man is not very tall. I would say, maybe 5'9". I feel this man has killed another child since then. There is a wife or a girlfriend he goes back to at times, and I feel like it's probably a wife, and he's not with her all the time. And she's frightened of him. I know she knows he's violent. He could be a very violent person. And had we had a drawing of him like I can do now with the police artist, she'd have recognized him on television.
If you believe Kathleen Ray, this is a charcoal drawing of Victoria de Santiago's murderer. He killed Victoria, and Kathleen believes another child since then, and he's still out there.
I believe it could be solved. Somebody out there, somebody somewhere has got to know more about this, but they've never come forward.
Although Kathleen's work in this case proved to be extremely accurate, cases like this are the exception, not the rule. And the use of psychics in police investigations is still not accepted by many departments around the country.
Kathleen Ray's case was one of those cases, and the hits were so specific, and the data checked out all the way down the line, from the reporters to the psychics themselves, to the families of the victims, to the police. It was rather unnerving.
But for the de Santiago family, a psychic detective made a difference. The discovery of their daughter 13 years ago has brought the family a small measure of peace.
Thank you, God. Thank you for finding Victoria's body. Thank you for giving me Kathleen Ray.
And now, they hope her vision of the killer will bring the case to a close.
My only release of mental anguish is to say something positive, warn people. Look, they're not just going to steal your car, they're going to steal your child.
Is this the face of a murderer? Kathleen Ray sees him in her mind's eye when she thinks of Victoria, and hopes that someone, somewhere, will come forward with the truth.
And finally, a story about the most controversial of all psychic phenomena. It's called psychokinesis, or mind over matter. As you'll see, there are some people who claim that the power of their mind is strong enough to withstand extremes of heat, cold, and the most agonizing pain.
It's not a phenomenon exclusive to the West. In almost every culture throughout the world, there are people who appear to have superhuman powers. How is it possible for these people to endure the excruciating pain of needles and rods? Where does the strength come from that enables this man to pull an airplane single-handedly?
When we see these kinds of phenomena that we don't understand, it's easy to call it magic. Once we understand it, we call it science. This is really important that scientists do take a closer look at this kind of phenomenon. If even one person can do it, it shows it's possible.
In Russia, we discovered a man whose superhuman abilities seemed to be more than just the result of mind overpowering body. Valery Lavrenyenko is renowned throughout his homeland as a real-life Superman. He has abilities that go far beyond the bounds of what is accepted as humanly possible. Sightings' first encounter with Lavrenyenko was at the Moscow Aquarium, where he tried to best his own personal record by holding his breath underwater for 15 minutes. He believes his startling abilities first began after a paranormal encounter as a young boy.
During a summer break, when I was in the 5th grade, I was hiking with some of my buddies in a local forest. Suddenly, I saw a shining object that reminded me of a plane. I took off on my own and was drawn to the place where I thought it had landed. All of a sudden, odd, shining stones were flying at me. I thought, run, or you'll be hit. But it was too late. There was a powerful blow to my head, and blood was pouring from a wound. For years, it was a mystery to me, until recently, when information about UFOs was allowed to surface in Russia.
Lavrenyenko believes it was this experience that gave him his superhuman powers.
2 minutes and 10 seconds.
Lavrenyenko's constant companions are his wife Natasha and his son Edward. Sightings brought them to Moscow to meet with our team of doctors, investigators, and researchers. Here, they observe what appears to be electrical impulse coming through a heated needle in his forearm. The same energy also seems to flow through his finger and burn a newspaper.
It's coming out not from his nail, but from his finger, from the depth of his body.
A burn like this can only be caused by electricity, and to explain this is impossible.
$4:50.
4 minutes, 50 seconds.
On the outskirts of Moscow, at the central train depot, Lavrenyenko agrees to demonstrate another feat of strength and endurance. It was hard for our investigators to believe that one man could pull a 30-ton train up an incline. But they were even more astounded to see how he planned to pull the equivalent of nearly 60 tons of weight. It was a feat no one in our team had ever witnessed. A warning: the following is not for the squeamish, and Sightings cautions that no attempt should be made to duplicate this experiment in any way. Using pliers, Lavrenyenko inserts 2 8-inch wires through his forearms and then attaches the wires to a rope that is connected to the train. At first, he is unable to move the train. The pressure on his forearm should rip the wires right through his skin, but the wires hold fast. Despite the fact that he is pulling the equivalent of 60 tons, Lavrenyenko barely bleeds, and the wires remain intact.
Bravo!
This is not a trick, it's a miracle. From the standpoint of a surgeon, what just happened cannot happen with an ordinary man. When you injure soft tissue, there is always bleeding associated with it. When the metal rod pierces the soft tissue, like we've just seen, there is always extreme pain associated with that. And furthermore, there was 60 tons of pressure on his forearms. How all that's possible, I just don't understand.
There are lots of documented cases of controlling bleeding through the power of the mind. That's probably one of the last great frontiers in medicine. Right? It's not just a matter of pain control, but it's also a matter of controlling bleeding. All right? What kind of vasoconstrictors? How did he actually close off those blood vessels when that needle went through his arm?
I think the place to start is honoring the phenomena. Study the lack of bleeding. Study the electrical phenomena demonstrated here. Study the ability of people to exist for long periods of time without oxygen. There's enough contained in any one of these phenomena to force a reevaluation of how mind and body work.
After nearly 7 minutes underwater, Lavernyenko began to surface. Although he didn't break his own record, for most people, just 2 minutes without oxygen could cause some brain damage. But Lavernyenko emerges unscathed.
Science always progresses like this. It's the odd example that one studies to find out what the boundaries of reality really are. That's how we paint the canvases and shred the old models, by studying the things that just don't fit in.
Psychokinesis, ESP, precognition, concepts that seem to contradict the physical laws of science. The people who believe in psychic ability challenge what science tells us are a finite set of rules governing the universe. But perhaps we don't yet know all the rules. In time, science may discover how to cultivate psychic potential and harvest the untapped powers of the mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.